we're going to talk about the Nephilim. So the Nephilim are mentioned in the Bible, and they're mentioned twice specifically. And then they're mentioned again sort of passively. You have to have known what was said about them before to sort of understand what was being said in the moment. The Nephilim were mentioned in Genesis, and they are basically they're the children of angels, right? Angels looked down onto the world, and they saw that women were fair, and they came into them, and they brought children into this world, and those children were great warriors. That's paraphrasing it, but that's what Genesis chapter 6 1-4 says. They were great warriors, right? So it's a small little bit that it mentions them. If you fast forward a little bit and you go to Numbers chapter 13, beginning at verse 30, it's the story of when Moses sent scouts into the Promised Land. So they'd been wandering around. They had just left Egypt, and they've been wandering around for a little while. And they get to the Promised Land, and Moses sends scouts into the Promised Land to check it out, and he sends them in pairs. And when they all come back, all of the pairs they're like all of these guys that Moses sent out. They're all, we can't go in there. That land is filled with giants. That land is filled with the Nephilim. That land is filled with mighty warriors that we'll get beaten, we'll get bruised, we'll lose, they'll destroy us. We can't go in there. And it's in this story where you hear Caleb and Joshua were one of the teams that went in. And those two guys are like, nah, yeah, we can do it. We can get in there. We can take these guys. We can beat them. God promised this to us. It is ours. We can do this. So mentioned in Genesis, mentioned in Numbers. And then if you, again, fast forward 40 some odd years, Caleb again, it's found in the 14th chapter of Joshua. See, Moses tells Caleb, the land that you went into, when it's time for you to take the Promised Land, that land will be yours. That's promised to you. That land, and because you were brave and you're courageous and you were so trusting in God, that land that you and Joshua went into is going to be yours. Yes, filled with giants, but it's yours if you'll take it. And so, again, fast forward to Joshua, 40 some odd years, chapter 14 of Joshua. Caleb has been fighting war after war after war. He's been helping all of his brothers, all of the other Israelites, take the land that had been promised to them. And he goes and he says, listen, I'm getting a bit older. Let me go into my land. Let me go into the land that Moses promised me to take it. And, he's sort of warned about it. He's like, well, but remember the giant? No, don't worry about it. It's God will give it into my hand. God will give it into my hand, and I'm going to go take it, right? I'm just as spry and I'm just as powerful as I've ever been. I will go take this because I know God is with me. So these Nephilim, they're seen not necessarily as good or bad. They're seen actually, sort of as both, that they are great, mighty warriors, but they are great, mighty warriors that aren't to be messed with. And the Israelites know this. The term sort of speaks to, it speaks as opposed to giants, it speaks to like giant of men, people that you don't mess with, to put it politely. These are guys, these are soldiers, these are warriors that you keep at arm's length, right? You don't tick them off. Don't rub them the wrong way. You watch out for these fellas. Now, you could look at this from the perspective that these guys were, that the Bible's literal, and that these were the children of angels, the descendants of angels when angels mixed with humanity. Or you could look at it from a human perspective. And I say human because it's not something that's only found in the Bible, that we attribute divine origin to heroic people, or we attribute divine origin to powerful people. This is something that has happened throughout human history and right across cultures. Right across cultures. Today in North Korea, the leaders of North Korea are held up as divine, coming from divine origins in divine ways, with divine creation stories, and how the world stopped the minute they were born and spun the other way, or whatever the case might be. The Greeks did this a lot, right? You can think about Greek mythology, where you see Hercules and Perseus, both of human and divine origin. You see it in the Iliad, Homer's Iliad, with Achilles. Achilles was the son of Athena, and she dipped him in that river so that the only place in his body that was susceptible to injury or damage was his heel. You see it throughout the origin stories of all kinds of different societies. We want to believe that we somehow have divine blood in us, that we somehow are not only, in the Christian sense, we call ourselves children of God, but we actually want to believe that somehow, some way, God's blood runs through our veins. And it's also not uncommon in many cultures that not only would we seek to proclaim our own divine origin, but we would offer a divine origin to even people who might oppose us, because it gives us reason to have lost to them. It gives us reason to that they beat us. Well, they beat us because they're giants. They beat us because they are the Nephilim. They beat us because they're the children of powerful, spiritual, otherworldly beings. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It doesn't literally that it's true. So this kind of thing has happened, and this kind of thing does happen, and this kind, we attribute divine. My God, we're doing it with Trump right now, aren't? You're hearing it happen with Trump. He's anointed and appointed. He's the Messiah for America. They're giving him a divine origin story. He's the next Nephilim. But despite the fact that this, these are myth stories, right? So Genesis is a myth story. The stories that we see in Numbers and the stories that we see in Joshua, they're not necessarily myth. They would fall more in line of a historical story, not factual. The history of a people is written with legend, right? So it's a legend story that sort of describes where the people believe they came from. It describes the history that the people believe belongs to them. And so while they might not be factual, there is something for us to learn in them. I hope that's why they're in there. What do the Nephilim teach us? What do the stories of the Nephilim teach us? For me, a lot of it comes back to what happens in Joshua 14, which comes back to what happens in Numbers, which come back to the origin of Nephilim in Genesis. In life, we're going to encounter giants. We're going to encounter monsters. We're going to encounter great warriors. And when we have those encounters, we need to respect them. We need to respect them. But we also may need to wrestle them. We may need to fight them. We may need to defeat them. And again, if you look at these, especially from Numbers and from Judges, that's sort of Caleb's deal. It's sort of Joshua's deal. Like, no, we can beat these guys. God's on our side. We can handle this. God's on our side. These monsters, they're nothing to us. God's on our side. These giants, we can take them. God's on our side. These amazing warriors, that's okay. We're strong too. God is on our side. So, the story being, no matter what you face, no matter how big that giant, no matter how mighty they may appear, no matter how mighty their reputation may be, no matter how strong, no matter how big their swords, no matter how big their shields, no matter how many of them there are, or how big the walls are that they've made, God's got us. You can do this. In God's strength, you can do this. As we're talking, as I'm talking, with all the news, I just can't stop thinking that war sucks. I can't stop. I can't stop hating the fact that we as humans seem to be, if we're not masters of anything else, we are masters of developing new ways of killing one another. New, much more efficient and effective ways of killing each other. To me, that's the monster. That's the monster we face. That's the giant that's standing in front of us. That's the mighty warrior with many, many victories. That's the massive walls that seem to be impenetrable. But we can do something about this. We can beat this monster. We can wrestle this warrior down. We can rip down these walls. Conquer what's behind them. People throughout history, across cultures, have often attributed divine origin to others that they had a hard time dealing with. They attributed divine origin to their heroes and to their enemies as a way of explaining how things got to where they are. And the Nephilim are no different. How the Bible, in particular the Old Testament, speaks of them as the story unfolds is that despite their divine nature, with God's help, they too can be defeated. So, for me, what are my monsters? What are the giants that I'm facing? What are the mighty warriors of great reputation that I'm standing against? Who are your monsters? Who are the giants that you're facing? Who are the enemies who seem to be unbeatable standing in front of you? They're the Nephilim. But with God, regardless of where they come from, regardless of how they may appear, regardless of how strong they are, with God, they're nothing for us to worry about. We can take them. Amen.